There's one person you can't forget. No matter how many times you turn the page, they come back. Through dreams, through memories, through signs. And you wonder, am I imagining all this? Or is it Allah trying to tell me something? What if this person was the one meant for you? What if despite the silences, despite the distances, they were looking for you? You're not crazy. You're not alone. What you feel is real. And in this script, we'll dive into the invisible dimension of these bonds that only Allah can create and make last. Do you think it's a coincidence? Wait until you listen to what your heart already knows. Panna. You've never been alone in this weight.
There's something you can't explain. A weight you carry without a name. An absence that accompanies you even in the most fulfilling moments. You pretend to move forward. You laugh. You live. But deep down, there's a silent prayer you've never stopped praying. You want to believe you've turned the page. You want to believe that time has healed. But all it takes is a silence, a dream, a detail, and everything comes back. Why? Because it wasn't just a person. It was a trace of Allah placed in your heart. There are connections that humans don't understand because they aren't born in conversations, nor in promises, but in divine decree. And sometimes, Allah plants in your heart the premonition of a soul that isn't yet by your side, or that has moved away without explanation, but that continues to vibrate in your existence like an unfinished note. Do you think you imagined this connection? No, you felt it. And this feeling comes from a place that even you can't control. Your fitra, the part of you that recognizes what is meant for you even before your mind accepts it. This person you can't forget. They're not just someone from the past. They're a soul with whom your heart signed an invisible pact, even before your eyes met. And despite the years, despite the silences, despite all the logical reasons to let go, there's something inside you that's still waiting. But not a waiting that destroys. A waiting that purifies. A waiting that only the will of Allah can sustain. You don't know it yet, but this person also feels this tug. Perhaps they're struggling with what they feel. Perhaps they're praying for closure. Perhaps they're afraid. But every time she moves away, life brings her back to you in one form or another. Not by coincidence, by divine decree. You weren't dreaming. You perceived a hidden truth, which only patience will fully reveal. When Allah chooses a soul for you, He creates a path for it to return, even if it turns away 100 times. And until the time comes, He lets the two hearts orbit each other. Sometimes brushing against each other, always seeking each other, never colliding. And all the while you think nothing is moving. But in reality, everything is falling into place. 2. What if what you were running away from was exactly what Allah was trying to offer you? You think you've moved on. You believe you did the right thing by running away. You say it wasn't the right time, not the right person, not what you needed. But deep down, are you sure it was your choice? Or was it a reaction to a fear you never dared to name? Sometimes, Allah places before you what will heal you, but because it's so like you reject it. She knows your silences too well. She sees too clearly into your hazy areas. And so, you back away. Not because it's not good, but because it's true. There are souls we run away from not because they are bad, but because they awaken something forgotten within us. A light we had stifled, a vulnerability we no longer want to show. And then Allah lets you walk away. He doesn't force. He never imposes. But subtly, he brings the person back. In a coincidence, in a look, in a message you no longer expected. Not to disturb you, but to remind you. And this time, she's different. Less noise, more silence. Less desire, more awareness. You feel she's not trying to convince you. She obeys something within her, something sacred. You observe her and you ask yourself 1,000 questions. Why is she coming back? Why now? Why you? What if it wasn't her who was pursuing you, but a divine order that she's following without fully understanding? There are people who don't know why they love you, but who love you with a constancy that has nothing human about it. Because they aren't guided by desire, but by the conviction that they were chosen to love you. And you, in your corner, you still resist. Because you're afraid of making a mistake. Afraid of suffering, afraid of believing again. But is that really wisdom? Or are you simply refusing to acknowledge that this person has changed? That Allah has changed them? There are ways of returning that aren't toxic loops. There are returns that are deferred appointments, preserved by Allah until the heart is ready, until the ego has faded, until the soul finally says, "Now I see." What if it were now? What if this gentle, discreet, almost invisible insistence wasn't there to convince you, but to wake you up? 3. Why is it always him? Why is it always her? You pretend not to think about it anymore. You fill your life with things to do, people to see, fleeting distractions. But when you stop, when the world goes silent, it's always that same name, that same look, that same vague but constant presence, which comes back to knock gently at the door of your heart. You don't talk about it anymore. You don't want to talk about it anymore because people would say you're holding on, that you should move on. But they don't know. They don't know what it's like to pray without knowing why. To feel an absence that no one sees. To cry for someone who isn't even there. So you keep it to yourself. And you try to understand. Why is it always him? Why is it always her? You didn't ask to feel this way. You didn't force anything. You even tried to move on. But every time you open another door, something inside you closes. And it's not a whim. It's not empty attachment. It's a spiritual lock. It's not that you refuse to love elsewhere. It's that no other heart speaks the same language as yours. And that language is the language of destiny. The one Allah uses when He teaches you patience through waiting and faith through longing. You don't understand why this person keeps coming back to your mind, but Allah knows. He knows what they mean to you. He knows that your heart isn't naive, it's watching. It isn't empty, it's observing. And sometimes, the silent insistence of a memory is the mercy of Allah, who continues to speak to you when everything else has ceased to touch you. It's not obsession, it's a reminder. You see this person in others, in dreams, in the unexpected. Not to imprison you in waiting, but to teach you alignment. You don't have to force it, you don't have to run, you just have to remain in your sincerity. Because the one Allah has truly inscribed for you can never be extinguished within you, nor replace you. Even if the whole world tries to fill that void. And as long as the time isn't right yet, you'll see, he or she will return. Again and again. Like a tide that nothing can stop. Like an answer that refuses to go away. Because it was written with your name on it. 4. Two hearts written on the same line of destiny. Imagine two drops of light falling from the sky at the same moment, but deposited at opposite ends of the world. They leave, each on their own, they grow, they break, they search without knowing that with each pain, they grow closer. It's strange, isn't it? How can two souls recognize each other before even speaking? How can a voice seem familiar even before it's heard? How can a look contain memories that you've never experienced together? It's because these souls, Allah connected them before bodies, before mistakes, before choices. They were aligned on a plane that the human eye cannot read, but that the sincere heart always ends up feeling. There are hearts that search for each other without explaining themselves, paths that draw together without forcing themselves, and silences that say more than 1,000 confessions. She, or he, doesn't come to you with overly grand promises, but with a discreet peace, a familiar breath. Something inside him says, it's there. Something inside her whispers, it's here. It's not a noisy passion. It's a sacred recognition, like two waves that have long crossed without touching, and which one day, without warning, gently merge. Not to make noise, but to finally rest the soul. And if you feel that he or she is still looking for you, even without a word, even after the silence, it's perhaps because forgetting was never an option, because Allah Himself has never erased your name from His heart. He or she returns, not out of nostalgia, but because their soul has never stopped walking towards you, even when their steps took them elsewhere, even when their faith was weak, even when you yourself had closed the door. There is a gentle persistence in divine choice, not a human insistence, but a heavenly fidelity. And when hearts are written for each other, the world may delay, mistakes may deviate, but the light always ends up uniting them on the same path of destiny.
5. What if you were the chosen one without knowing it? What if you looked at this story backwards? What if it wasn't this person who was pursuing you, but Allah who was showing you again and again, it is you I have chosen to carry this love? You may think that it is she who never forgets you, but what if you were the chosen one? What if you were the pillar of soul, the silent guide in her life, the one whose constancy is a mercy, the one whose presence, even distant, is a sign of guidance? You think you are the one waiting, but what if, in reality, you are the one through whom Allah wants to heal others? If it's your heart that He chose as sacred ground, not to suffer, but to guide, purify. Why do you think this connection has remained alive, even when everything around you has changed? Why do you think your heart has never completely closed, even after the exhaustion, even after the silences? You've tried to love elsewhere. You've tried to extinguish that light, but it returns, always. Not because you're weak, but because this bond was woven in the invisible. And every time you want to turn the page, there's a whisper, a memory, a strange sensation, as if something is missing, as if your soul refuses to lie. Do you still believe it's a simple attachment? A whim of the heart? An emotional obsession? No, it's more than that. It is Allah who shows you without words that this person is your test or your handwriting. Do you want signs? Look at what you feel despite the years. Observe what you feel despite the separations, even when you no longer speak to each other, even when your paths are different. The heart, however, remains attached, and that is not human love. It is a divine reminder, a form of tawakkul that you did not choose, but that you carry like a silent mission. So ask yourself one last question.
What if this insistence wasn't there to disturb you, but to awaken you to who you truly are in Allah's plan for others? If you feel deep down that this message is personal to you, then don't ignore it. Allah doesn't place this kind of truth in your heart to confuse you, but to enlighten you. You don't need to run. You don't need to force it, but you do need to listen to the signs. Stay aligned with Him and prepare your heart. Because this connection, if it is truly chosen by Allah, nothing can stop it, not even time. Subscribe if you want more reminders that speak to your soul. Leave a comment if you feel this video touched something within you. And above all, never stop trusting in the one who hears what even your heart cannot express.